Thank you for having us. My name is Jonathan Munar. I am the Director of Digital Media and Strategy at Art21.
Ball, a classroom teacher outside of Toronto, and an Art21 educator who've worked with them for the last year.
So we're going to talk a little bit today about how Art21 uses distance learning technologies to support all of our initiatives, and specifically a program that we have that's about 5 years old now called R21 Educators. Okay. So first, a bit about Art21. Art21, we are a nonprofit contemporary art organization dedicated to inspiring a more creative world through the works and words of living artists. We're most known for our television series on PBS, our documentary series called Art in the 21st Century, which has gone through 6 seasons as of last year. They are typically hour-long episodes featuring 3 to 4 artists at work, shot documentary style, artists speaking about their process from their studios, from museum spaces, from gallery spaces. In addition to the PBS series, we've also have a pair of series that are distributed exclusively online, short format videos that we provide as free resources to our viewers online. So over the course of 10 years of producing video, we've amassed quite an archive of video content, all of which serves as a foundation for the types of initiatives and resources that we produce at Art21. So from the very beginning of Art21's inception, we are a completely virtual organization outside of one-off programs that we do with museums and in spaces. We started off with a very early distance technology called broadcast public television. But from there, you know, since R21 was started, our web presence was very important to what we did, and important for us to be able to engage with our audiences year-round, aside from just the every other year cycle of broadcast on PBS. So R21's programming is focused mostly on artists speaking in their own words. So we, as an organization, remove our voices from these videos and just have the artists speaking for themselves. We provide a very broad access of an intimate look into the artist studios, and we take this and provide access to screening spaces across the world in museums, in libraries, in galleries, and other art organizations. And we even bring the artist studio into the living room. So I just took a quick scan of Instagram to see how people are watching our programs and accessing our materials from their homes on their laptops with a shiner in hand, of course. We also, our website is very central to what we do. Everything that we produce is on our website, films and the resources that we produce, all available online for free. And we also maintain a very active social media presence, of course, again, as another way for a virtual organization to stay engaged with our audiences year-round. Finally, a small example of something that we've done online, facilitated completely online, as an attempt to broaden access is an R21 Translation Project, which launched earlier this year. It was a way not to just make our videos more accessible to other communities, non-English speaking communities, but also to nurture a community of volunteer translators to help produce these videos and to share that same passion of bringing the artist's words into their own community. So all of this leads into what we do education-wise at Art21. Education from the very beginning has been very core to our organization's mission. Education, with our education initiatives, we look for ways to bring educators and students to connect them not just with the art of our time, but also to the motivations, the curiosities, the working methods, the themes, and the strategies that artists take. That we encourage educators and students to not just create art like artists, but also to think like artists. why do artists produce what they produce? How do they react to their surroundings and the things that are most relevant to them at the time? We provide a number of resources, again, for free on our website. Our resources are largely inquiry-based. We don't really produce standard curriculum or lesson plans. We kind of do a non-didactic approach to creating resources. So this is just an example of one of our educator guides. We try to create opportunities to open up spaces for critical thinking and dialogue about not just contemporary art, but the motivations of contemporary artists. We try to introduce ways to inspire new ways of teaching with contemporary art, which leads into our R21 Educators program. R21 Educators, what we've always tried to do with our education resources is to find those ways to introduce contemporary art and contemporary art practices into the teaching process, not just in the art classroom, but also among other disciplines. Other ways for students to think like artists and how those methodologies might apply to their own practices. So R21 Educators originally started off as a day-long, single-day workshop of just ways of educators getting together and thinking about how to use contemporary art within their practices. It eventually evolved into what is now a year-long professional community of educators, a network of sorts of educators to get together year-round and to collaborate and to learn from each other and feed off of each other. So it's not just R21 teaching educators how we think contemporary art can be used in the classroom, but it's also ways for educators to learn from each other. Every year of the R21 Educators program starts off with a summer institute, which is actually happening right now. It started yesterday, and it's a week-long institute where all the educators fly to New York, get together, and this becomes a week-long, very intense program for the educators to all be in a room together to prep themselves for the year ahead, the year that's going to come of working with each other year-round. It's very intense. There are a lot of discussions. I'm surprised that a lot of the educators make it through the entire week. Don is a great example, and he'll talk a bit more about that at his part. This is just another small example of something that we've done in the Summer Institute. We've introduced methods of distance learning. So, for example, at last year's Summer Institute, we had the artist Mary Reed Kelly Skype in for a conversation with our group of educators, and which was particularly interesting. She not only discussed her own practices, but she also gave us a virtual tour of a virtual set that she created for one of her films, which I thought was very fascinating, and all facilitated she was in Rome at the time, Rome, Italy at the time, because she was in Rome, New York at the time. Anyway, whatever, she was far away and she Skyped in and she talked to our educators. Just a way to introduce that. Now, when the Summer Institute ends, all the educators go back home, and we use these online spaces to keep that conversation going, to keep the collaboration going. And we have both synchronous approaches and asynchronous approaches to continue the dialogue amongst educators. So for the asynchronous approach, we use an online collaborative space, and in our case, we just happen to use a Ning. Is everyone familiar with what Ning is? Ish? It was cool at one point, but it's still kind of cool, and it serves its purposes for what we need, which is an online collaborative space. We take advantage of all of the different tools that Ning provides in order to be able to share resources amongst each other, amongst the network and community of educators, as well as having the R21 education staff involved in constant dialogue, ways to critique and to reflect on their own practices. The Ning is a closed private network, the way that we use it, so it's a very safe space for all of these educators to get together. There is no fear or intimidation of someone just happening upon what is essentially a work in progress through a Google search. It's completely closed, so it's a safe space. That's our asynchronous platform. Our synchronous platform is a video conferencing platform that we use called Safari Live. This is real to have that real-time collaboration. So throughout the year, there are sessions that are set that are regularly scheduled, but then a lot of educators have taken upon themselves to do smaller breakout sessions. Within all of this, video is always very core to what we do at R21 because of our films, of course. We teach our educators to not just be active consumers of video, but to also use video as a tool for reflection for their own practices and for critiquing each other's practices. So we encourage our educators to film themselves, film their own practices, film their classrooms, and then share these videos within the Ning where everyone can critique and reflect and comment on each other's video and create some sort of dialogue where the educators are really all learning from each other. At the same time, it's a way for each of the educators to show what is happening in their own classrooms with educators across the country. So with that, I'm going to hand it to Don Ball to talk about the educator's perspective.
Thank you. When I started with Art21, looking at Art21 as a classroom teacher, it was a series of videos. And I was very excited to have those to use in my class. I could push a button and show a 15-minute clip about an artist, but it meant that all of us had to focus on the same thing at the same time. I also bought all the resources, the book resources, because I think it's important to have those in my classroom. And when students were dealing with images, and I thought it was appropriate, I would open a book and sort of put it in front of them, so the resources would be in my classroom. As Art21 developed and became sort of non-linear, went on to DVD, suddenly you're able to get to a chapter within a segment and get to very specific images. So the technology changes the way I work with it in my classroom. The website organizes things alphabetically, which becomes really easy to look through. So at the Art21 website, you can go to an artist, get to their video sections, look at transcripts from some of them, look at still images that don't exist in the video, and be able to see it more richly. And one day I was looking at this site. I recommend students go to this site, and they love it to do research. They go and they stumble around in the world of Art21 and find things. I found the button that said Learn, and I clicked on it one day, and it had a thing for the Art21 Educators, which I'd never heard of. And it was closed. It was only for Americans. You had to be American, but it was this great program. And I sent a note saying how terrific it sounded, but I work in Canada, and too bad it's not available to me. And she sent a note back, said, I don't see why you couldn't apply. Why don't you? And so here I am. What I wanted to get out of this program is kind of a richer knowledge of visual arts, but also to be forced to use the technology differently. So in my classroom, this is an activity that I've done for years, where I have students looking at postcards. It's hands-on. I think that looking at art actively is really important. So rather than me showing a single image, here I've got a stack of things, students look through them. And working with a partner, I asked students to choose a central image, which they leave on the table. They move to a different table, and they have to drop another image down that is in dialogue with the first one. I have my students curating. Then another group adds an image, and another, and they've essentially curated a little exhibition. I do it non-verbally. I work with visual arts kids who aren't necessarily comfortable speaking. So that's part of my job, is to coach them into being able to talk, and getting them to talk about art is one of the ways that kind of works well for them. Using the Ning, we are asked to post things. We post films, we make ourselves videos or photographs. And I thought, how can I take the things that I already do and use those? So I posted a nonverbal discussion to my teacher colleagues that have been on Art Educators with me, Art21 Educators, and started with a central image, and then digitally we could go out to the web and find an image that would relate to that one. So I was encouraging other teachers to kind of communicate in that same way, non-verbally. When we look at video in the classroom, things change. We're not looking at a static image anymore, we're looking at a dynamic image. We're looking at a time-based thing, where we might have to spend 5 minutes looking at something rather than a second. We do have the artist's voice here. So the addition of that is a terrific resource to us to hear the artists speaking and see them work in their studio spaces and in exhibition spaces. Through Art21, we're also encouraged to think in big ideas. When we applied, as educators, we had to apply with a partner. And each partnership had to include one visual arts teacher and one non-visual arts teacher. So I went upstairs and spoke to my buddy, the science teacher, and asked if she'd be willing to play along with me. And she thought it was a terrific idea. She comes from a family of artists and has always been interested in kind of the broader world sense. At Art21, we were asked to think about big questions. And she said, well, that's curious, because in a science curriculum, they actually have sections called big questions that they are to be covering with students. So it was a way that they could connect. This is a Janine Antony work that maybe some of you know, Lick and Lather, made of chocolate and soap. And I showed this to my students, and I asked them, we were asked to think about big questions to pose to our students, and I thought my students do this already. So I asked them, what big questions is Janine Antony thinking about in her work? And I took the questions up using my wireless technology in my classroom. And as we get to the bottom here, the bottom question I think is just, what causes the deterioration of identity? Thank you. A little gasp in the corner. I posted this online, and my teacher colleagues said, you're really asking them great questions. And I said, no, actually, they're generating these questions by looking at the art intently. And, generating the questions. At the end of a session, they're free to take notes. I encourage them to take notes in different ways. They stand up with their cameras, they take a picture of my blackboard, they post it on a How to Survive website that they have for my class. They post the things online for me of what we're doing. In my classroom, I do look at how we look at art now. These are things that students bring to class with them. Here they are with their laptops and their tablets and their smartphones. Some of them have flip phones and they don't pull those ones out. But these resources are sitting in my classroom, where once I was taking them a book and say, take a look at this artwork. Now I say, look up Janine, they've got it on the screen before I leave the table. It's a very different world. They have access to all of so many more resources than we have. So working with a colleague I've never met, someone that's from the Ning, Jack Watson, whom some of you know, we did a Pinterest thing where my students generated big ideas and big questions they were working on. We posted them, and then his students found art images that related to their thinking and posted them for them online. So they were creating an online discussion. My students thought we needed a little more than that, so they wanted to add more descriptors underneath of why I'm choosing this artwork for your big idea. Kind of collaborative thinking, being able to extend it. Then, just being a bit of a brat with this, I was like, how can I use some of this video technology that I'm being asked to use as a teacher in my classroom? So we set up my classrooms on that side. The 4 video screens are on laptops in my students, and the other one is a teacher in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and his students are gathered around a table with a single classroom projector and a laptop. So we had watched a couple of the same artist videos, and then the students were dialoguing or creating conversation about it online, teaching them the skills of creating. But we thought creation is also more important, so what can we do to get students creating? And we came up with an idea where students would write instructions for each other, like the Fluxus movement someone spoke about earlier, had them write instructions as artworks. And they passed those along through the mail, and then the results they ended up posting digitally and communicating back and forth. My student is on that side. And she wrote as her instruction, she described her face in text, and she sent it out to a stranger who received it, and then she also asked the stranger to send a description of her face back in text. So here they are having a video conference, my student's holding up a drawing of a student she's never met based on a description, and on the darker video is a student holding up a drawing that she'd done based on the description in my classroom. It's an area we want to explore more, getting the students to create together online. We're also asked to do reflection. The day I bought my first iPhone, I also bought a fountain pen. I didn't want to give up old technology to take on new technology, and I've always kept a journal, but I wanted to treat myself, so the nice fountain pen went with it. At Art21, we're asked to reflect using video, which again adds that dynamic, moving voice aspect, and how do we train for that? How do we get a little better at that? These are some examples of tasks that we're asked to do. We have to reflect as teachers for 1 month, reflect on something that you learned this month. We had to take a snapshot of our class. We recorded a single class for 60 minutes and fast forwarded them to see actually what's happening in our classroom, what are students doing, how are they engaged. At times, students are creating the video that I got to post. One of the strategies that we used, perhaps you've heard of pachakucha. It's a Japanese design and architecture strategy to get people to speak very quickly, and each slide stays up for 20 seconds and students have to speak about it. Tricia in science has used them with her students. These are her students who have to talk about artwork that relates to the science concepts that they're learning, And I've had my students do essays where once they would hand a written paper into me, now they're showing those images online and being able to talk to the class about them. So that it's a much more broad way of showing their learning. These are videos that Tricia did as a culminating task at the end of a unit where they had to talk about sustainability and environmental science, finding a contemporary artist who is dealing with those issues in their work. Where are the scientific principles coming up in the artwork? Be surprised if this works. This is a nice little 20-second video which I had my students make responding to an Art21 artist they'd looked at. She was looking at Ai Weiwei, and another student who responds by talking about his own artwork. Many of them are very uncomfortable being on camera, and you have to teach that kind of skill to them. So some of them wanted to talk just about their artwork but not actually appear. On here is a big question that I have. What's the point of connecting students and art anyway? What is it about? How do we know if we're successful at what we're doing? Is it the number of times that they come into the museum? Is it the depth of the experience that they have with it? Is it an openness? Is it making them better citizens? To me, it's much richer than a numbers thing. And I appreciate that we need numbers, and people in museums need them for certain reasons. I want my students to feel more connected when they get to the artwork. So I want the prep work to lead them to be able to see things. I want them to understand things that haven't been made yet. I want them to have a skill set that will take them to the future. Somewhere in here I didn't talk about, but connecting to core curriculum I think is essential. So being able to get art, which kids tend to like, into the math curriculum and the science curriculum that they may not like or understand fully. Understanding that we don't have to think in little parcels, but that scientists actually are interested in recording things, which you can see in the collection here. This is another assignment. It was simply put a bird on it. So my student was doing some look at that, and she drew silhouettes and put them on handmade papers, made buttons for our class, and then sent a bunch to Chapel Hill for the students that created the assignment. In the next 5 years, this is a task that we have. My school board outside of Toronto, it's a fairly wealthy board, and they have changed to a new BYOD policy, a bring your own device policy. And students are encouraged to bring their own electronic device to school. We have become Wi-Fi compatible. And this is a guide for parents that was sent out with our report cards this year for all students. And it's comparing the success or what the capabilities of a tablet are versus a smartphone versus a laptop, which one might be most useful. Of course, there's problems here. Right? It's economically, there are people that will not be able to reach this. There are students who have 4 children in their families, and we can't simply dole that out. As a teacher, I want to make sure that the resources are in my class so students can access distance learning in a variety of different ways. But I think it's kind of a sign of our times. Here's how to buy some equipment for your students. And this is our board's way of making sure that the technology is available without having to do all the spending themselves. One sidebar to a question that was asked earlier about technology in the classroom. In trying to do some of these things, trying to do the Ning from school, I was blocked. I was not allowed to access that site from my school. It had friendship content. And because of friendship content like Facebook, we were not allowed to access it. Partway through the school year, my school changed their strategy, the board changed their strategy, and suddenly friendship was okay again, and we were able to use it. My colleague in Chapel Hill was not able to do video conferencing, had to link up and get his board to kind of come in and tech him to be able to get a specific laptop that he could use to communicate with my classroom. So there's lots of hurdles to get over, but I think that we can. And there are some examples of ways that we've been able to do it, and certainly more to do in the future.
So looking back at the first 5 years of the R21 Educators program, we've seen it evolve a lot. Like I mentioned earlier, it started off as, the framework of it started off as what was a single-day workshop, and now it's evolved into a year-long community. Even then, when we started in the very first year, we didn't expect it to be a growing community where we kind of imagined that at the end of a single year of an R21 Educators, of R21 Educators, after a single year, everyone would just go their own ways, and each year would be compartmentalized into their own network. But what it's turned out to be is that with every year, we are adding more educators to this network and to this community. As Don has just mentioned, Don has been working with Jack Watson, who was an R21 educator the year before you. So we've created this space for educators to be able to collaborate on a year-round basis. And what we do hope to do in the future is to learn from what these 5 years have taught us, but at the same time to not let the technology hold us back. We do not work for the technology works for us. So we look to summits such as these to help build up that power, that we are the ones that can help bring that technology to a point that serves us and serves the way that we want to accomplish the programs that we need to accomplish.